Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional radio.
Hey, good evening. It's, Friday the 17th. It's 42 degrees and it's cloudy, but it's dark here, so I can't really tell.
Yeah, it's the weather's fluctuating like crazy in Indiana. It was 70 last week?
Yeah. It's supposed to be back up in the 60s come Monday, but right now it's cold. It's been so cold that I've actually been worried about my wisteria. I got a bunch of blossoms, and then they're all just real limp. But, apparently if they're still hanging on, there's hope. So.
Can't put shit too out early here.
Well, I can't help it. These are vines. They just grow. They're pretty tough. I have every expectation that they'll be fine. But, never know. So, I went to the internet recently, and I learned that there is a Justice League Dark Apocalypse War animated movie that just came out. It was released, well, no, it's not. It's the trailer's been released. It's supposed to be released in May. Well, that's something to look forward to.
Wonder if they'll stay on schedule.
Well, I think it's already done. They released the trailers. That's kind of hopeful, right? That's a good outlook.
Yeah, because sometimes they have the trailers done, but not the post editing.
Yeah.
Like the animation might be in one stage, and the I don't know if they have extra effects they add on.
Sure. No, it'll be interesting because the first Justice League Dark movie was really fun. Because it introduced a whole slew of, it didn't introduce them. It tapped into a whole group of characters that we don't normally see take center stage, and some of those characters have been existing in the CW verse, the Arrowverse.
Yeah, the Berlanti Arrowverse. They had Swamp Thing. That series just got started, and then. Not too many of the. Constantine. Trying to think. There's a couple of them. Haven't seen Zatanna yet. What the Phantom?
The Phantom. Yeah, there's what's that? The demon, the one that rhymes all the time. Yeah, what's his name? It always bugs me because I can't remember that one character's name, but he's one of my favorites.
See, it's like Phantom Stranger.
The demon Etrigan.
Dr. Fate. Or wait, no, Dr. Fate was one of their enemies. Yeah, there's a couple of different teams. But it'll be interesting to see which iteration they bring in.
Yeah. At least it'll be interesting to see how they go take their mystic arts, magic, and supernatural powers to combat Darkseid. That'll be really interesting.
Oh yeah, because they just brought in Darkseid in the what was it, the end credits on that last one? Or was that the Justice League animated movie?
I think it was a Justice League animated movie.
Yeah, those animated WB shows are pretty good. I like them better than the Marvel They're a little more. The writing's a little better.
I'll be right back. Yeah, I think that they're doing a really good job with the animated series that have been or sorry, the animated movies they've come out. I'm really pleased with that kind of output. And
Yeah,
I also have a lot of hope that they'll do a good job with Batman Beyond because that's still in the works apparently as of you know end of March this year. They were still talking about doing it. That's only a month ago.
yeah. It seems like there's still going to be time for studios to open back up. They don't seem to have the same kind of restrictions as like public spaces, so we may see stuff still completed on schedule this year.
I feel like movies or production companies have the best opportunity to remain functional as creatives and still be outputting like really solid consistent content because a production company has the opportunity to really manage their personnel in a way that is unique to other industries. Oftentimes if there's like a studio location, then people have to be nearby, or if they're going to do a location shoot, they all have to go somewhere anyways and they have to be close by. So I think it's easy to manage something like that.
Yeah, and a lot of studios have had their sets built out, and
Like in the middle of nowhere.
yeah, so it's like, you know, it's not going to be difficult for them to have these things operating and not put a lot of people at risk in the process.
Yeah.
It's not like they're, yeah, in the middle of a city in a lot of cases.
Yeah, it's not going to be like athletics, where I mean, you've read about how there are talks of doing no zero spectator televised athletics events.
Yeah, and then they're talking about making WWE essential workers.
Apparently, Vince McMahon and Dana White and Jamie Dimon were all selected for a reopen the economy committee, and they weren't notified about this until it was released to the press. So they were notified by like every media outlet there is.
Oh wow, I didn't know that part. That's
Yeah,
pretty crazy.
yeah. A bunch of
I
people were.
kind of figured, but I wasn't positive. It sounded like something that happened that way.
Yeah, well, it's these are trying times or exciting times or you know insert any other number of ways to describe what's going on. Apparently, there's what is it? How does this work? So, in Indianapolis, there's a company that's created some kind of test, a quick test, and they've entered a contract to deliver like 50,000 of these tests to New York, the state of New York, every month, and they have capacity to produce like 100,000, and they offered to give the state of Indiana these other 50,000 a month, and they expect to be able to expand production to like 150,000 units. And apparently the state's like, no, sorry, we don't want it. And the guy's like, but I'm offering it to you for free. And they're like, no, it's okay. So of course immediately I'm like, wait a second, what the hell's going on here? There's free test available. What?
On the one hand, I can understand not taking untested tests, but on the other hand, these are extenuating circumstances. So
These apparently they are working. I think they've been the whole rush FDA approval thing that's going on right now is I think they're all you know looking for anything they can. But apparently this test has been used in Carmel with pretty good success, and they've been testing all their frontline workers, and they've tested like several hundred have come back as asymptomatic but positive. So there's a there's just a lot at stake, I think, especially since you know the one report of this stays in the system for up to 37 days.
Yeah, because I guess my thing is you don't want a test that gives false positives,
Yeah,
and then or that isn't giving
accurate
accurate
results.
results.
Yeah,
So that's kind of where again it's like just because the test says something is positive doesn't mean it's not a false positive. So that's why there's this measure of I can understand not rushing to take new tests, but like you're saying, there's some semblance of showing that they're working. So there's not really a huge reason not to actually take them.
yeah. Apparently, you can go up to Carmel and go through their drive-through, and for $175, have the test done.
That's
That's that's
that
the
is
part that's like fucked
that
up.
is yeah, like that it's $175 is like, well, okay.
They're selling it to the state of New York for like $3.50 or something per.
The same company,
Yeah, and if they get and they're willing to give it to the state.
but they're selling it to individuals for 175,
Yeah,
which that makes no sense. There's nothing about that that makes any sense.
that's what I said.
Because my thing is like, I question their motives. If they actually want to test people, then they would be giving it away to people for free. Like saying, "Oh, if you actually want to get tested, the state's not. We want to give them to the state. We're going to charge you directly $175." That makes no sense. That motivation is wrong. There's something wrong about that there.
Yeah, $175 cash.
Even sketchier. That's even sketchier. Something sketchy about that.
Yeah, well, that's why it's like one of those kind of things.
And with them charging 175, I can understand why the government's not taking their shit for free.
Well, they're gonna charge. Here, I pulled up the article. It's $3.57. Where did I just see that? Yeah, $3.57 per kit. That's how much they're selling to New York for 50,000 kits over the next per week for 2 months. And then they were going to give it to the state of Indiana. And it cost them, what does it say? $130 raw cost. Wow. That's like, how does this even work? This guy's just he's just.
Like, is he like a startup business? Who is this? You know what I mean?
Oh man, this is.
So does he have pharmaceutical equipment? Where's this guy even coming from?
Zach Kahn,
Or company.
He's a Carmel resident who owns a former Northside toxicology lab, Era Diagnostics. Huh. This stuff's crazy. It's toxicology diagnostics. So they converted their lab to study so they could test for something. They're testing for something. I'm dubious of this. This makes me kind of like even more like, I don't know.
Yeah, so they went from testing for drugs to testing for COVID-19. Yeah. And then especially again, if they're saying they were gonna sell it at 100 and what?
$175 cash for people just to drive up and get it.
If they were gonna sell it to New York for 350, they were gonna take a loss of 127 on each one.
Yeah.
So again, something's not adding up here.
I think it only works because they're getting some kind of stimulus or economic. There's got to be some kind of government incentive for this.
There's something there that's like, yeah, there must be getting some economic stimulus payment or some sort of government contract that then covers the cost beyond the 350 or something.
Yeah, I bet at the end of the day, the government gets to select whichever, big pharma to mass produce this. there's got to be some kind of component to that where it's tied to some kind of government interest
Well,
or
because then
private
that's
interest
part
that
of it
has control
is
of government.
then government's giving out contracts to people that aren't qualified. Because I guess one of the companies that got a contract for 55 million had no prior experience making or it was like either masks or ventilators or something. But it was a new startup that got a contract to make them for like 55
Mm,
million. Um, so that,
man, there are so many proven filter designs. It seems absurd at this point to have to reinvent the filter or even the mask. The mask seems like it should be something that's pretty has been sorted out. Unless we're talking about boutique custom fit silicone, which I can see being really expensive actually.
well, because then part of it is it wasn't, they weren't even sure for the first couple of months if it was airborne or not. So the mask thing becoming like more important, like, yeah, the masks should have been the the mask issue should have been taken care of like before all this stuff came around anyway. And it's like, but nobody in America took that shit seriously until this year. So people used to make fun of Chinese people for wearing masks in public, or Michael Jackson for that matter. There's all kinds of examples of Americans making fun of masks, and then all of a sudden when they realize like, yeah, you need to wear a mask because people get sick from other people. Suddenly, then the masks are a hot commodity. So then it's like, there's not enough masks.
Yeah.
Somehow there's not enough, and then you find out there's people sitting on them and hoarding them, and that they were planning on price gouging until they realized that once it's a state of emergency, that shit's illegal. And they're like, oh no, I was gonna donate these masks.
That doesn't happen though.
No. Um,
The other day I was scoping masks on Amazon, and they've all got this little message that says, we're prioritizing our shipments for the healthcare frontline, that kind of stuff. And I understand that makes sense. But it was interesting because there's this entire range of the N95 mask. It filters out 95% of particulates down to a certain size, and they use this kind of a I can't even remember the name. It's like a special type of fluid dynamics, and it kind of explains the random nature of the way micro droplets travel once they get into a dead airspace and encounter structures. So they use this kind of spun loom of plastic that creates a randomized layer. That's actually the filter inside of most of these N95 masks, this kind of crazy thing that they spin on a drum. But anyways, so there are types of filters that are all approved beyond N95. There's N99 and P100, and I think there are even the kinds that have like additional carbon filtration, so they can just grab everything. But that's kind of crazy. That's so you can like walk into a chlorine environment and survive. But there are these are filter designs that are standardized, that have to pass certification. In America, we've got the whole like N and P numbers, but in Europe they've got FFP or FPP 3 or 1 through 3, and they all kind of relate to each other on some level. But there are all these masks that are really expensive, and they've got really fancy filters, and their prices have remained pretty much the same, even though they have like a higher filtration value. They're still really expensive. They're still more expensive than the N95 was ever.
well, they're very durable. They last.
Yeah.
So if you sanitize them, they can last like,
You can use them a lot.
I have one that's 7 years old. It's a P95 mask that
Nice.
we're using because it still works, and we just sanitize it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I was also looking at UV light options to create like a little sanitizing device. They're the type that fit inside ductwork. So I'm gonna create a small appliance so that I can fit a mask inside of it and sanitize it with ultraviolet light. I don't think anything can. I don't think this thing can withstand ionizing radiation.
I would hope not.
I mean, if it can withstand ionizing radiation, then we're all fucked. So
Yeah, but, that's again where it's like, I I don't know if there's 100% proven method yet, because if they could say, oh, ionizing radiation is 100% proven, they would be blasting that like everybody walks through a UV thing before entering anything.
yeah,
Like,
you'd have to dry your hands out with UV light.
yeah, exactly. I feel like unless they, again, unless there's just some concerted effort to let people die, I assume we would hear about something that has 100% efficacy.
Yeah,
Like,
I bet it's the kind of thing that you have to let it saturate with like a UV lamp for 30 minutes, something that would burn your skin or blind you or fuck you up if you were exposed to that level of concentrated ultraviolet light. And I bet, and also the what is it inverse square law. So there's probably some ideal distance where you can maximize the output of the UV lamp so that you get the best kind of quick cleaning. But if you were to like hold your hand next to it, it'd probably you'd end up with like a bar of burnt skin, a line or something.
well, but then that's where you see those like sanitization showers in public, and what was it, Japan or South Korea,
Oh yeah,
where there are ways to have public sanitization for people to just walk through and get sanitized. Like,
yeah.
that's not impossible to make happen, but it just has to be deployed in a way that's orderly.
I bet at some point the parking lots to any place people will have to drive through a sanitization tent that will spray a bunch of Lysol all around it and then reclaim it, and then also on the way out just blast it with UV light. Be like, okay, everybody, close your eyes. It'll be like a car wash, but it'll be the Santa wash. It'll be everywhere.
Well, and there's just like, you think about shit like pink eye. We just had names for diseases from like just people spreading fecal matter because we were so dirty as a species. Like, there's shit about the way we existed before where it's like we should be way cleaner and have way more attention to hygiene than we do, as people who believe themselves to be modern. But there was a period where the hand sanitizer got out of control, and then people's immune system started going down, but it was like this weird over sanitization period, and then the response seemed to be to stop sanitizing everything. Because
Yeah.
like there was a period where Purell was everywhere.
Yeah.
Everybody had Purell for a minute. It was hot. It was like a popular thing to have Purell. And then, I think people started shaming the Purell culture to then, the hipster back to the mountains and, not washing multiple times a week. And there's all this shit that became counterculture that was directly associated with hygiene that, obviously contributes to where we're at now, that we need to stop, people need to shower at least once a day. People need to wash their hands all the fucking time. People need to have sanitizer accessible all the time. There's just shit that we weren't doing that we need to do now.
Oh yeah, that's the truth. Let's see where it was.
I mean, I don't know how many times I've been to a public restroom and just not tried to touch anything because I know it's not sanitary. But now it's not like I'm gonna touch stuff in a public bathroom, but I know people are gonna be cleaning shit way more, and it's just not,
Well, apparently Procter and Gamble sales are up like a measurable amount because everyone's at home doing laundry and cleaning the place.
Yeah, you know, flour's sold out, yeast is sold out, oils is, people are cooking, like people have to cook for themselves more. So again, we're shifting to a self-sufficient economy where then you realize how much of the economy was just spent working so you can pay somebody else to do your basic shit, and now you do your basic shit and then you don't have to pay somebody else to do it. So there's not this necessary or this necessity for all this extra work. It's like if we have a not even necessarily a minimalist life, a sustainable self what's the word, when people are making stuff for themselves most of the time, then we don't need to have as much extra work to buy like other people's time.
Yeah. So the other day I saw this MSNB, NBC, I guess it's a poll, and they were asking men and women about roles in U.S. households and who is more likely to do each of the following. And so with laundry, it's men 58%, women 13%, which leaves 29% unidentified. Nobody's doing it. And then clean the house was 51% men.
Well, maybe they only gave them two gender identity roles.
Maybe, but this is kind of amusing. So with clean the house, it was 51% men, 9% women, and nobody at 40%. And then childcare was 57 and 43. So this last number, this nobody column, that's like what's missing from 100%. These are like incomplete, just if it's just men and women. So there's a percentage of, it goes on. There's groceries, shopping, and dishwashing, just, normal things. But that means that there's a percentage of the population that's just, like you say, unaccounted for. They're just not putting it into this information. Maybe that's the people who come and do the laundry or clean the house or perform childcare. Maybe that's like,
Yeah.
So that's like a percentage of the population now that if they're not doing that job for somebody else, they're doing that stuff for themselves. Hopefully.
Well,
Or maybe they're not. Oh,
that's a complex issue because a lot of those people that were doing that job for someone else were not in a position where they were like going home and well off. So
Yeah.
these are the underprivileged, abused segments of society that they don't want to go wash somebody's underwear. They have to wash somebody's underwear.
Yeah.
And they do it for probably less than minimum wage because they're probably doing it under the table. So there's all these things about that segment of the population that effectively, when people talk about trying to get the economy back to work, they're talking about we want to be able to go back and abuse brown people again, and we want to be able to go overwork brown people and not have to wash our own underwear and not have to wash our own shit-stained laundry. And it's shit like that where, when you have people talking about reopening the economy, that's what they're saying, but it's a euphemism to talk about reopening the economy because now that they know it disproportionately affects black people and brown people are dying at a higher rate, they don't care if the economy is closed because when everybody was at risk, it was stay at home, we'll send you checks. But once they figured out, oh, white people aren't dying at the same rate, let's go back to work. Let's get this economy back open. And that's exactly how the fuck it happened.
Yeah. What can you do, though?
I mean, well, we have to, not just us, but people have to be aware that when they have this rhetoric out there that is white supremacy couched in the form of protecting an economy, there's a double speak happening that if you're not aware of history and if you're not aware of what is going on the ground and who's actually dying, because this gets back to why they're delaying the census, because the census was planned to happen right now, and if the census came out as planned, it would show that this thing hit and started decimating a specific communities at disproportionate rates. So the census has now been delayed because they don't want that shit to come out right before the election either.
Yeah.
So there's all these things about how, if you don't understand how statistics work,
None of this stuff will make sense.
none of this stuff will make sense. Yeah. And
And not just that, but distributions.
Yep.
Like
And
the
even down to the test distribution, like,
hmm
we're seeing the numbers we're seeing represent the distribution of tests, not the actual distribution of coronavirus.
yeah. I think that's the really slippery part of it all is that the numbers are so misleading and the reporting is delayed. We hear about I hear about numbers at the county level because I have friends who live in different counties and they say these numbers are not accurate. And it's like, well, I wonder how long it's going to take for this to be reflected. They didn't have an accurate number for Monroe County for like several days, I think, like a week or something like that, for the first person who tested positive in Monroe County.
Well, didn't they just double the numbers in Wuhan? So that's like a 3-month window, it
Of the
seems
death
like.
toll.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's because they were backlogged. Holy
Right.
crap. Imagine a system that's so overrun that they get backlogged on keeping track of dead people.
So then this clearly,
This is so big.
like, well, the fact that they released the backlog proves that they're not hiding the shit. So
Yeah.
there's like all this like cognitive dissonance about conspiracy theories and who's hiding what. If China was hiding information, they wouldn't have released the backlog deaths. That just doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah, it's funny the agency that's trying to say that China is doing all of the misleading of information is the one that hasn't took forever to react. And I mean they're reacting now, but
Well, and it's a backpedal trying to shift blame to the World Health Organization, because now that they defunded the World Health Organization, it's like they're trying to say it was the WHO that didn't react correctly when it was obviously the American government that was not taking it seriously. So
yeah,
they're trying to point the finger at China, they're trying to point the finger at the WHO. There's
it,
all these people that they're trying to place blame on besides
it's funny.
themselves.
There's a 60 Minutes clip floating around where this administration officials trying to be like, you better come up with a video if you want any credence with your question line of questioning. And so 60 Minutes digs into their archives and pulls up this tape where during during Obama's administration they're talking about H1N1, and they pull up another one from the Bush administration, and they're talking about uh, what was the other one they're talking about? Maybe that was H1N1. Anyways, they're talking about these fairly complex situations where they need to plan for this. And so the guy's saying like, if you can't compare this administration's reaction to previous administrations because they didn't plan for it either. But even GW planned for this stuff. Like, holy
Right.
shit,
Yeah.
George W. Bush's administration planned for a pandemic.
Well, and I think there's something to it. People are trying to be like, "Oh, nobody's doing anything about car accidents or suicide." You
Yeah, they
can't
are.
you can't catch suicide though. You can't catch a car accident. It's not a communicable death. So when people are trying to compare death from a communicable disease to suicide or a car accident, there is a large misunderstanding of why coronavirus is dangerous, and trying to compare it shows that they don't understand a communicable disease and what that actually implies.
Yeah, well, that the reports are coming in that they're not even sure if people are developing immunity to this.
Right, yeah, people who have gotten it are getting reinfected even though they have antibodies.
Yeah, so the antibodies might not even be a solid measure of whether or not it might just be the asymptomatic people. Those are the people that they need to identify because they clearly have something that prevents this from turning into SARS or ARDS.
Yeah, it may be more than antibodies, and the
Yeah,
science is just behind.
yeah, that could very well be it too. There are a lot of unexplored avenues with all of this. I think, especially, well, I think we definitely need to start testing the asymptomatic people or testing for asymptomatic people because that's the next group, right? They got to keep
Right.
moving on. They can't
The
just
tests
stop.
the tests aren't really trying to identify what's keeping the asymptomatic people from developing symptoms, whether they contract it or not.
Yeah, They're not even tracking that. They're just tracking the people who develop symptoms. It's like suggesting that we go try and restart the economy when all we're doing is treating the symptoms and not even looking at like why some people develop the serious disorder that fucks them up, like rips their lungs apart, destroys the heme in their blood, damages their kidneys, all sorts of nasty shit. They got to figure out why some people end up going down that route and other people are just, walking around, passing it along.
But that's getting back to the proactive versus reactive
Yeah,
approach, and American approaches are just way too reactive instead of being proactive when possible.
yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, like we just have to make people be more proactive.
That means wearing masks and washing hands a lot.
That's exactly what that is.
That's
The
really
masks
what
are
that means.
proactive, not reactive.
I think it's nice that they say it's like, well, the masks are for people so that they don't spread it. But no, I think if they could figure out how to mass produce enough masks with replaceable filters, and people really only need to go out like once a week, and otherwise they can maintain social isolation. I think there's a way that everyone can end up with a mask, and we could ride this thing out.
Right.
But everyone's got to get on board.
Exactly. Because my thing is, if the science says that the mask prevents people from spreading it, doesn't prevent people from contracting it. If everybody's wearing a mask, then nobody can spread it through their mouth. That doesn't mean they can't spread it through other ways.
Yeah.
But at least they can't spread it through their mouth or their nose that way.
Mm-hmm.
So then, and if I can't catch it from somebody else's mouth or nose, then that drastically reduces my risk of catching it, period. So, this is the proactive versus reactive. And we just have to, make it more commonplace to be proactive about problems and not wait until shit hits the fan.
Yeah. So, speaking of things that are hitting fans, Japan is talking about developing their own supply chains free of China's manufacturing, and because they don't want to be caught in another situation where nothing's coming in because everything's manufactured in China. They don't want to have their economy based on Chinese manufacturing anymore. And so it's interesting because Xi Jinping was about to go over there and announce some special, newly delivered treaty with Japan to, bring them both into the next 100 years of prosperity or some crap. And it's not happening. They're
Yeah, and I think now more than ever, every country is starting to realize that outsourcing is a national security risk,
oh yeah.
and that Japan is shifting away from it. Everybody else is going to start shifting away from it too.
Well, every growing middle class is going to have to adjust to reindustrialization. We all are. Everyone is. All over the planet.
Well, and when you point that out, like, I think that's actually the way the middle classes will grow in each nation.
Yeah.
In that the only way to grow that segment is to sort of bring capital back and reinvest it in society.
Yeah, reinvest it in employees, in training, and create a reason to retain people and talent and experience.
Reverse globalization.
Yeah, it's reindustrialization, reverse globalization. That's a campaign slogan right there.
Right. Yeah,
Somebody out there, you guys can have that, but you got to credit us for that shit.
But this is actually the right time for it.
Yeah.
Globalization has hit its peak returns and it's starting to become a drain on every economy that it's attached to for various reasons. It's just it's too much entropy.
Yeah.
Mathematically is what it comes down to. It's just too much entropy.
Yeah. Well, it got too chaotic. We got to rein it back in.
Too many middlemen.
Yeah. The frickin' middleman economy. So the middleman is what, that actually makes sense, because if we apply the bell curve to it, the middleman is the one that's going to be, there's going to be the most of them.
Exactly. That's exactly right, man. That's exactly right.
The middleman.
Exactly right.
It's the middlemaning that brought about peak capitalism and the failure that it just can't avoid. We gotta remember this stuff in the future because at some point capitalism, I'm talking like, a couple thousand years, but peak capitalism will return in a way that nobody's ready for because it'll be, a couple thousand years of prosperity and you just we just can't be lazy about it. It's the whole point of securing supply chain. It's like we can't really. I mean, I think it's actually really amusing how it works out for Amazon and their product lines, where they buy out all the components for the products that they identify as best sellers that are brought in by private labelers. But that should be illegal. You shouldn't be able to buy out the supply chain from under people. If it's
Yeah.
something like simple, like resistors or a certain plastic mixture or the foam, not just the foam, the yoga mats. They shouldn't be able to buy out the entire supply of yoga mats from a factory in China. They won't be able to do that in America though, because those yoga mats will be more expensive.
It's that same principle of someone buying up all of the
Masks,
available supply and then trying to jack up the price.
but
And it's
they're doing it
persisted
differently.
for
That's
well, I'm
the
saying it's
that's
persisted for thousands of years
yeah.
in like people trying to say that that's the best way to accumulate wealth. Well, now we know that that's the best way to accumulate wealth, but it's also the best way to build the most income inequality and have a disproportionate wealth status so that most of the people in your economy don't have any money and there's only a small group, and that's feudalism. So it's like we can say it's free market capitalism, but it's actually feudalism rebranding itself so people just continue to buy into it. There's a caste system that exists, and if you don't realize that you're in it, it's because you're hidden from it and you're occluded from it. It's because you're probably at the bottom. The people at the top of the caste system know they're at the top. It's the ones that are at the bottom that are constantly fighting amongst themselves, punching down, saying, "Oh, I'm an essential worker. Fuck these unemployed people that are getting more money than me right now because they're made to fight amongst these." Again, it's like the attention is turned so that the people who are essential workers are mad at the unemployed people instead of the rich people.
Well, they're essential. That's the new working class. That's what they're called during this phase or this period of whatever it is, governance. They are literally the working class. They're the ones out there working.
Yep.
I think
Everybody.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like hairdressers and salons, and makeup artists, they can't work. Of course, the events that they were going to be preparing people for are probably canceled. So
But at the same time, this just proves our economy can run without billionaires. If a billionaire is not an essential worker, then they're
that's
not essential to the economy.
that's awesome. I love that. That makes me so happy.
I mean, we have scientific proof now. We know what the essential workers are to keep the economy working. We
Well,
can lay out which ones is food, medicine, transportation, shipping,
scientists.
farming. There's all these things that we can now scientifically say are essential for the economy. And then there's other stuff we can say scientifically are not essential.
Yep.
Billionaires, number one. That's the number one thing that's not essential.
In fact, the billionaires want everyone to go back to work and risk their lives because they're losing money.
Exactly right.
Because their investment portfolio is starting to it's starting to have a few more digits like disappear than they're used to. Of course, then there are guys like David Geffen, who is like, I'm out on a multi-million-dollar yacht and I have enough supplies to last me several months. And showing
Right.
pictures of it, it's like, this motherfucker, really? I think
Well, I think what's happening is the people who retreated to their underground bunkers, their supplies are starting to run low, and they need to come back up, and they're trying to say, everybody go back to work so we can make it look like we weren't hiding out in our bunkers. We want to pretend we weren't trying to let y'all die, but they definitely were.
they came back out and they're like, wait a second, they're still here.
Yeah.
It wasn't virulent enough, guys. We need to wait it out a little bit
Man,
longer.
'cause I don't know if you remember during those 2012 era where they were like hyping up prepping, and they were showing those videos of all
Oh
the
yeah,
like
during the whole during
underground,
what was it?
like
MERS
the
was
mine.
2013, wasn't it? 2009 was swine flu.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about when people were flipping out because of the Mayan calendar.
Oh,
Yeah,
man,
when
I had forgotten about the Mayan calendar.
the certain demographic that wants to go back to work was flipping out over the Mayan calendar, they were also building underground bunkers, and like the super rich people had major ones, but nobody's talking about those right now because that's where all the rich people went, and they want to act like they didn't go there.
Yeah,
They
I
act
remember
like they weren't going
seeing
to let everybody die.
stuff like that. You know, people converting old missile silos into
Yep,
their bunker
exactly right.
platforms, and
You're not hearing about those right now because they're the people retreated to them
yeah,
and want to
that
act like they didn't.
bastards. Joke's on them. All we got to do is
Exactly.
find their air intakes and plug them up.
Those things are such poor plans, man. It's like, yeah, it's just people who watch too many zombie movies. Ultimately, is what it comes down to, with too much money. But this just gets back to the notion, like, this country has literally been through a civil war and society didn't break down.
Yeah,
Society is way more resilient than people
think it is.
want
Yeah.
to give it credit, or it's not sexy if society isn't resilient.
Well, I think there's a level of infantilization that goes on with this idea that we are incapable of managing this or managing through this or surviving this, that we desperately need the guidance of some entity or organization so that we can navigate these troubling times, when in fact, if we band together and work together and develop plans that are mutually beneficial, we will come out, better than when we went in. It's just a matter of figuring out a way to do this so that people aren't being taken advantage of for something as trivial as labor that could be performed by a machine. Like, let's give people an opportunity to participate in, being creatives or in the information economy. If somebody can flip burgers and work a cash register, they can absolutely enter data.
Yeah, and there's just clearly all these people that can have their shit done from home. And it's like, yeah, let those people just start working from home. If they don't want to work from home, obviously they can go back to an office, but there should be an option now. There's at least half the economy, if not 60%, should have the online option, and this is what this just proves.
Yeah. Well, hopefully all this stuff is absorbed. People are able to figure out the best way to move forward, and that we don't get duped again. It's just the way the government is being operated right now. It's not being operated for our interests, and that's unfortunate because, man, what were there were like 3,000 to 4,000 people in Michigan protesting the lockdown, and they blocked a road in front of a hospital, a level 1 trauma facility. This is the group. This is the same demographic that was like, we should be able to run over protesters and shit like that. Who
exact same demographic. Exact same one, because they were mad when Black Lives Matter was blocking highways.
Yep.
Their exact argument was, what if an ambulance needed to get through? You're inconsiderate. You need to go protest in free speech zones. That's the exact same demographic.
Oh, that's good stuff. Hey, we'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening.
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.